Hold
Great.
on. It takes a few seconds just to go live.
I thought we were live. Or are you recording?
Yes, we are live. Thank
Great.
you.
All right, well, let's get started. So good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We truly appreciate you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We truly appreciate you taking your time in your evening to join us. My name is Christina Coons, and I'm the Family Support Specialist with the Belonging Network, and I will be hosting this evening's panel for you. The purpose of tonight's parent panel is to offer real-life insights, personal experiences, and practical advice from those currently parenting teens and tweens. Our goal is to create an open, supportive space for learning, sharing, and connecting as we explore both the unique challenges and incredible rewards of parenting older adopted children. So throughout this panel, we hope that you'll gain valuable perspectives, helpful tips, and a sense of community as you continue on your own adoption and permanency journeys. We also hope to inspire those pursuing adoption and permanency to consider older children and teens and stay curious and open-minded. So before we get started, I just want to start off with a land acknowledgement. So the Belonging Network's main office is located on the ancestral unceded lands of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam First Nations. And I myself am speaking to you from the lands of the Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, Katzie, and Tsawwassen Stolo Nations. The Belonging Network is committed to listening, learning, and participating in reconciliation. All right, so I'd like to start off by introducing to you our three sets of parent panelists. We actually have one set, Amanda and Jenna, who couldn't be here tonight as something has come up, but they did really want to be here. They have answered a couple of questions, so I'll be sharing some of those with you tonight, and I'll tell you a little bit about their story. So I'll just call on the names of the other panels if you want to give a little bit of a wave. First of all, we have Tracy, if you want to give a little wave. Thanks, Tracy. And we also have Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jenna and Amanda, who isn't able to be here tonight. So Jenna and Amanda adopted their daughter Mia when she was 13. She just turned 14 this past April. They said it was love at first sight. After being shown a picture, they knew immediately that that was their daughter. Amanda knew all her life that she wanted to adopt an older child, and being a little bit older themselves, it felt like the right choice for them. When they met Mia, they were blown away by the spunky, well-spoken, smart, confident, funny girl. She could speak for herself and had no problem telling them her likes and dislikes. She went back and forth on the mainland for a while. And then when it was her first weekend to stay overnight, she decided she didn't want to go back. So she's been with them ever since. They are three peas in a pod, and laughter and love lead them around every corner. So they sound like a really fun family. I can't wait to share some of their answers with you tonight. And then we have Tracy, a single mama who adopted her son Gopi internationally from India. He was 9 when they were matched, 10 when she took custody in March of 2023, and he is now 12. So I just wanted to share this set of photos with you. Such a handsome young man. So taken from the left was on March of 2023. The middle picture was from February 28th of 2024. And this last picture on the right is just taken last week. So yeah, they grow up so fast. So he's now 12. And then last but not least, we have Kelly and her husband, Lyle. It's just Kelly here tonight with us. So they adopted their daughter, Sydney, through MCFD. They met Sydney in person in November in 2021 when she was 15. This was after a couple Zoom meetings when Sydney visited a couple extended weekends, and then she moved to Surrey in February of 2022. And then everything became legal and official in August of 2023 at age 17, and she's now 18, correct? Yes, perfect. So welcome everybody, and please feel free to add anything throughout this presentation that you feel comfortable sharing about your story. Okay, so let's dive into our discussion. That's what everybody's here to listen to. So as I speak this evening, I encourage those of you listening to submit any questions you may have to our panelists through our Q&A that you'll see at the bottom. I'll be sure to include those as we go along, and if not, at the end. And also feel free to engage using the chat box with one another. So I have prepared a list of questions to guide our conversation, but we'll try to keep it as interactive and flexible as possible. So Rupinder has posted those instructions in the chat. Okay, so to kick things off, I'd like to ask our panelists to share what motivated them to adopt an older child, teen or tween. Was there something personal in your life that led to this decision? Maybe I will start off with Kelly, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Perfect. You can hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So my husband and I were foster parents with MCFD, and we had been fostering for about 5 years, and we saw that there was a real big need for permanency for older kids. And I myself at the time in my mid 40s was like, I still call my dad all the time on the phone, even though I'm in my 40s. So I can't imagine aging out of care, and who would you call, right? So we started our journey there. Well, we continued to foster, and then we kind of changed streams a little bit and started looking at some older kids who were looking for permanency, and that's it. Easy, just like that.
Thank you, Kelly. Tracy, did you want to share any of your personal motivations?
I had waffled around for years over the question of adopting. Should I, shouldn't I? Oh, do I want my life to change? Oh, am I even too old? I was 50 when I started the adoption process. And it just happened to be COVID arrived in March of 2020. And it hit me pretty hard in the sense that I live alone. I run a small company where I spend most of my time driving around alone. And I traveled a lot, mostly alone, because then I could go where I wanted and so on. Anyway, COVID came, and I really realized that there was a big chunk of my life missing, and that was family. I have a sister, but she's way far away. My parents were both deceased. Yes, I've got cousins and so on, but I really realized that family was sort of my missing link, if you like. And I'd look around my home, which I'm doing right now, actually, and I thought, I've got it pretty good, and I've done all the things that I wanted to do. I run a company, and I travel, and I was financially secure. And I really came to the realization that I have a lot to give to a kid. And, at the age of 50, there was no way I was going to take on a young child. And I didn't think that that would be right anyway, because there's so many older kids who would thrive in an environment where, there's lots around, and, mom is financially doing okay, and we can travel, and we can explore the world together. I was thinking at the time that somewhere between, I don't know, 8 and 14 would be the age range that I would be looking for. And then at the time that I was matched with my son Gopi, it just so happened that he was a 9-year-old, and the picture that they sent me at the very beginning of the matching process, he had this great big toothy smile, and I fell in love with that smile. And so from that point on, he was the one for me. Love at first sight? Yeah, I guess so, kind of. And anyway, and it's suited both of us ever since.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, my next question. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced, maybe before, during, or after the adoption process? And how did you navigate those challenges? If one of you want to offer to answer that question.
Sure, I will. So can I just sort of know, Christina, the people who are on this call, are they all matched and are waiting for children, or have they done their home studies and they're waiting for matching? And can you give me a sense of where they
I
are?
believe that most people that are attending, I would assume would be waiting parents, so that some they're either thinking about adoption, pursuing adoption, maybe taking their AEP, maybe done their home study. That's kind of, I think, the population of people we're hoping to speak to today. And just anybody curious about just hearing other perspectives, maybe other parents parenting kids as well.
So in the early days when I was just getting started, my concerns were really about, what the heck I knew about kids. I hadn't, ever since one of my cousin's kids were really young, I associated with them, but then they grew up. And there really weren't many kids in my life. I have an ex-partner who had a young son. And so I guess you could say I was kind of like a pseudo step parent for a while, but that had been years before also. So I was really sort of wondering if I had the skills and the knowledge to be able to do it. That was my initial concern. And then once I was matched with my son, well, no, back up. Once we were in the home study process, and for those of you who are past the AEP portion and have done all the education stuff, they talk a lot in the education component about special needs, chronic conditions and that sort of thing. And then once you get into your home study, there was a big chunk of that time that was spent talking about, what special needs would you be willing to take on, and what chronic conditions would you be willing to accept. And that scared the blank out of me. Like, oh my goodness, like what was going to happen, and what kind of conditions was my kid going to have, and that sort of thing. That was the early days though. And then from the time I was matched with my son, and we did a lot of video calls, between the orphanage where my son was and me here, the other side of the world. And getting to know him erased all of those concerns. Honestly, I never gave them a thought after that, except to start thinking about, what supports he was going to need, or what that I assumed he was going to need, and what I was going to arrange for when he was coming home. But that was really the extent of the worries, the concerns ahead of time. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. What about you, Kelly? Did you face any challenges along the
We
way?
did. I think anybody pursuing adoption, there's challenges, just depending on the type of adoption and wherever. Because we were adopting through MCFD, we met our child, or were first introduced to our child through a networking event, which happened during COVID. So it was like an online virtual event, which was really interesting to be a part of. But when we had then proceeded and had expressed interest through our social worker, there was some stuff that came about that technically she wasn't really free and clear for adoption at that point. So there was still some paperwork that MCFD had to do. And it was kind of a potential that maybe we wouldn't become a family because if this paperwork wasn't completed, but because we were already foster parents, she was able to move with us here, and they just basically transferred the foster placement. So then she was in our home for the first year and a bit as a foster placement instead of our daughter. So that kind of brought a little bit of challenges with it too, because we're trying to establish our relationship as a family, and MCFD was still pretty heavily involved in there, and some challenges with the schooling and stuff because we didn't have those conversations. MCFD was having those conversations, and it was out of district in a different community, so there was some challenges, but we were all pretty committed, and well, not pretty committed, we were all 100% committed. And yeah, I feel there's always going to be challenges. It's just having the resources and the support, being able to access like through the blogging network or local community groups to be able to say, hey, because anybody that I've met who's adopted, there's no two adoption stories that are alike.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right, I'll go to the next question. So what do you find to be one of the most rewarding aspects of adopting a teen or tween? Maybe something that would differ from adopting a younger child. Is there anything that stands out?
They're already potty trained.
Yes.
They have their voice already, and they're not afraid to use it, in my experience. Most of the teens I know, anyways, and they'll be able to tell you for the most part what they need or what they like or what they don't like. It may not always be through their words, it might be through their actions, but they're able to kind of advocate for themselves. Especially I find that kids that are coming through MCFD, that's my experience, is they've kind of had to work hard at learning how to advocate for themselves. So they're not shy in saying, this need isn't being met, and I need you to help me find out how we can meet that. So babies can't do that.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Tracy.
I think the single most rewarding experience that we've had, he and I, in the last year and a half, not to go into too much detail, but in India, there is very little free education. To put your kid into school, you, the parent, or you, the orphanage, or you, the organization that's in charge of looking after children, have to pay for it. My son was not blessed with having a lot of education from the time he was little. There was almost like a play school, or we would probably call them junior kindergarten here, that he went to. But when he came to Canada, he was 10 years old at the time I brought him home, and he was reading at a low grade 1 level. And as far as math was concerned, he could add 4 and 5 and mostly get 9. And he had no idea about multiplication or division. So his education was sorely, sorely lacking. Within a year, because he's such a smart kid, and thank goodness he's learning to love reading. And as of when he was tested at the beginning of September, he's reading at a mid-grade 5 level now. And that's a year later. I'm just bursting with pride.
Aw, thank you, Tracy. Yeah, sounds extremely rewarding to see that progress and just understanding like the life that you're able to give him. So thank you. Okay, so moving on. So before making the decision to adopt, it's very normal to have concerns or hesitations. So let's talk a little bit about that. Did you have any concerns about potential behavior or attachment struggles? How did you prepare or address for these concerns?
So during the home study, of course, there's a lot of talk about the child and the grieving and the loss that they go through, and how it can impede initial attachment once they're placed in their new home. But truly, my home study anyway, in no way gave me an understanding of that. I took another course called The Art and Science of Transplanting Children. It's a Gordon Neufeld course. Gordon Neufeld is world renowned in the field of child psychology and so on. And this course that I took through his institute was aimed at adoptive children and foster kids, and to a certain extent for teachers in the school system. And taking that course, again, scared the blank out of me, because one of the things that he talked about in that course is some of the insecure attachments and failures to attach and what they look like and so on. And so that was a very big concern for me, knowing that I was bringing a 10-year-old in, and oh my goodness, like what if he ended up with reactive attachment disorder or some of those things. So I found that very, very stressful. Sort of a case of knowing too much for the situation that I was in, and that the fact that I hadn't brought my kid home yet. Yeah, I spent a few sleepless nights thinking about that one.
Was there anything besides taking the course that you tried to prepare? I guess just educating yourself with
I'm big on, if I don't know something, research, find out. And so, and sometimes you do too much research and you can get even more freaked out about all of the things that could go wrong, instead of thinking, let's just relax and then we'll see what happens. And that would have helped me more than anything else. Cause I found that a big one.
Thank you, Tracy. You want to add anything else?
Yeah, for us, we were lucky. Well, I shouldn't say we're lucky, because most foster parents that I know are pretty amazing people, but we were lucky to form a pretty good connection with Sydney's previous caregivers, and they were very insightful into kind of potential, I wouldn't say behaviors, but it's communicate, like that push and pull of a teenager, and then the push and pull of having multiple caregivers in your life as well, right? So they were able to give some insight into things that they had experienced. It's the home study, or not the home study, the proposal package. Man, it gives a lot of information that isn't necessarily applicable, because it's someone's opinion of an experience that they had on the day that the package or the care plan or the whatever was being written. And unfortunately, it's attached to our kids for the duration of their time, that whatever this process is that's going along. And I know, because as a foster parent previously, I was a part of those meetings, and looking back, some of the things oh gosh, I wish I would have said that differently or came at it from a different lens. So, I mean, I guess my advice would be to take that plan, that proposal package, with a grain of salt. And I'm not the same person that I was a year ago either, and I'm a grown adult, right? So if I'm able to kind of see things within myself that I want to change and make different, I think our kids are the same way as well. So I don't know if that answers anything that you were asking, or I just went on a little rant.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. Okay. My next question is, do you have a story or experience where you overcame a particular concern or challenge in the adoption process?
During the adoption process itself, not post-placement?
Well, either or, actually. Yeah. At any point where you've overcome a challenge.
The biggest challenge, now we've had a few challenges that I can maybe talk a little bit more about as we go, but the absolute biggest challenge that we've been facing, and I had no idea that it was going to be that way, was dealing with the school system. I can't even express the shock and the horror and the sense that I was irrelevant and nobody was listening to me, and nobody gave a crap about, my kid and helping my kid make a success of himself. Like, I was horrified at that. So that was the biggest challenge. Have we overcome it? So my son started school. So I brought him home in May of 2023, and he started school in September of 2023. And that whole year, I swear, every day I was sending emails to the teacher and to the principal, and my son was coming home crying, and I was telling them the things that he was telling me about the fear and the lack of assistance, the lack of support and everything else. And I would reach out to the school, reach out to the school, reach out to the school. I was in talking to the principal, oh God, I don't know, 15 times in the first year that he was in school. And by the way, he was thrown into grade 6 because that was the age that he was, never mind the fact that he'd never gone to school before. So long story short, or I'll make it just longer and longer, the school system was absolutely awful to deal with. Having said that, I spent all summer thinking, oh my God, what should I do? Should I change schools for him? I even gave thought, we live in Vancouver. We live in Champlain Heights, which is right on basically on the edge of Vancouver where it meets Burnaby. I even thought, maybe I should sell my house and move to Burnaby so that he's in the Burnaby school district. Like, it was really rough. Anyway, September came and I left him in the school he was in, thinking at least it was familiar to him and there wouldn't be yet another change for him to go through. And he's got a phenomenal teacher this year. And then I reapplied for the third time for a recognition of his chronic health condition through the school board. And they finally approved it. They ignored all of my applications last year. They finally approved it. And if you know what an IEP is, we just got him set up with an IEP. Gosh, I think it was 2 weeks ago. So have we overcome all of the school challenges? Probably not, but we're in a heck of a different place than we were a year ago, which was pretty awful. And I'll be absolutely honest about that. It was a dreadful experience.
It sounds like you've just been nothing but an advocate for him, though, and I praise you for that, because he's very lucky to have you who continue to fight for him to get that support. So,
that's one of the items I had on my list for, if we get to a point where we're asked to sort of give 3 tips or helpful hints or whatever. And that's absolutely one of them. Nobody, if they did, I wasn't sufficiently listening, or I was overwhelmed by the educational material. If anybody told me about advocating for my kid back in the early days, I missed it, because I had no idea that was going to be necessary. And it still to this very second horrifies me that I had to go through all that, and my kid had to go through all that.
But you did it, and it sounds like he's in a really great place.
Much better. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Kelly, or I can move on to the next question? Okay. Okay, now let's talk about preparing your home and family for the arrival of your child, teen, tween. Can you share how you set up your teen or tween space when they first arrived? How did you create a welcoming, safe environment for them?
I'll start on this one. We had multiple. Sydney lived in a more remote community. We're in Surrey, which is a big metropolis of a bustling place. So during our first kind of couple of visits, she would come for the weekend, which I'm sure was terrifying, just getting on a plane and flying to a place to meet some strangers you've talked to on Zoom. So then we kind of, talked about her space, our houses in general, and her space and her room. And then subsequent visits, we actually, because she wanted this type of bed, she wanted this color paint. So we actually went and we picked out paint, and then we painted it together, and we couldn't find the right bed, but we managed to find, so we kind of worked on it together to make it her space. I think at basically 15, 16 years old, she's got a pretty particular style. She likes a lot of pink, and still at almost 19, she likes a lot of pink. So she just was a part of the process and helped us create that space together.
That's great, because at that age, they have a voice. They can tell you what they want. They know what they want, and being able to give them what they want is definitely helps to create that welcoming safe space.
And she didn't want the motivational vinyl sticker thing that I had on the wall, and she didn't want the green paint that was on the wall. And so it was good. It was fun.
Thank you, Kelly. Tracy, did you want to add anything to that?
My son is now 12. And so because we were not, together until I actually went to India to get him, every time we were on a video call, I would ask him questions, what's your favorite color, and who's your favorite superhero, and what kind of sports do you like, and that sort of thing. And so I decorated his room based on those sorts of comments that he made. And it was totally fine for the first year. But now, as he's now 12, he's much more particular. And we had to get him a new desk, and we had to get him a second bookshelf, and then he wanted this kind of bedding and this sort of thing. So he's getting a little bit more choosy now that he's that little bit older and just about starting the puberty process.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, my next question. What strategies have you found helpful for involving other family members or friends into the life of your teen or tween?
Okay, I'll immediately jump on that. This is a two-sided coin, this comment that I'm about to make. I told my closest people once I was matched with a child. I kept it pretty close to the chest beforehand. I think I told two of my best friends ahead of time that I was starting the adoption process. The rest of them, once I was matched, then I told those folks. And people can be very well-meaning and say the stupidest things without even realizing the effect it's going to have. So my friends were, for the most part, positive, but I had one cousin tell me that she thought I was crazy. And then I had a very close friend say, "Oh my God, why?" And so I guess yeah, that's another comment that I'm going to make in the helpful hints section. Don't be alarmed or surprised if people make weird comments that you think are suggestive of the fact that they think you're going to make a lousy parent. It's nothing like that at all. But that's one of the issues that I had with the before the child came home. For the most part, I've got several good friends who are instrumental in my son's life. My friend Tim, who's my longtime dear friend, and he's Uncle Tim to my son Gopi. I've got a bunch of elderly relatives, and I've got a first cousin who is now the guardian. So both all positive stuff from those folks. And I'm very glad they're in his life, because honestly, it's a lonely road as a single parent if you don't have supports. And I can't imagine if they weren't around. So they were instrumental.
Yeah, actually, Skip asked a question about asking you to share about your support system and how that looks now and maybe before adoption, and how important that is. So you kind of spoke a little bit about that. Obviously, very, very important. Kelly, did you want to add anything about helpful tips for involving other family members? And
yeah, I think my family's pretty involved in adoption anyways. I have a younger brother who was adopted at birth. So my family, it's the more the merrier kind of thing. And I think going through the fostering journey with us, our families, for 5 or 6 years, it was hard for them to make connections with some of the kids that would come through our home, and then they would be gone, right? And then so I think our families kind of were like, we get to keep this, like this one's staying, like we get to keep this one. And everybody was like excited to meet and make connections and form that relationship. So yeah.
That's great. And so it sounds like you have a really, really great support system.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Great. Okay. My next question, here's a big one: setting boundaries. So how did you establish boundaries early on in the process, and what worked for you? What didn't work for you? Big one.
I can go. We were, like I said before, lucky that the previous caregivers were kind of like, a lot of our parenting styles were the same. So it was easy for us to kind of just move a lot of those rules and expectations to our house. They were in parallel with kind of who and what we are. And then we're also big on start as the way you intend to continue. So having the rules, like everything kind of in place, and this is just kind of how it's going to be. It's maybe a little bit harder to set those connections and that relation, like that kind of relational end of things when you're kind of coming in a little bit more of a hard ass at the beginning. But we found that was the best strategy for us. This is just kind of how it is. This is our view on electronics, and this is our view on sleepovers, and this is our view on curfews, and this is where we're at with schoolwork and like all of that kind of stuff, just so it was clear from day one.
Has she tested you since?
Gently, I think personally, and this is part of our parenting style, is kids want expectations, and they want those. They may say, oh, this sucks, and this is lame, and that's not what my friends have, and you're so mean, and all of those things, but really deep down. And I think especially kids who've been a part of the foster care system, they need those sorts of boundaries. They might push them, but deep down, they want them and need them.
And it's just important to follow through on what you say you're going to do. It sounds like that's what you do. So
yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. Tracy, did you want to add anything?
I remember when my social worker during the home study process asked me what I thought about, setting rules, setting boundaries, that kind of thing, when the child eventually came along. And I said, I think that it's going to be such a traumatic transition for him, because remember, there's no transition period. I went and got him and brought him to a completely different world. So I said, I'm expecting that he'll be quite traumatized and it'll be very, very stressful. So I'm thinking that I'll just go easy on the rules at the beginning, and then we can sort of start to set them once he settles in. And she said, you got to change your mind on that one. She said, you got to start off the way you intend to continue. She said, because changing the rules later is going to be so much harder than just establishing them to start with. I took that one to heart. And it's a very good thing I did, because my son came from he had an incredibly awful early life. And when he was put into the orphanage where he was when I went and got him, they tried to make up for some of that early trauma by basically letting him have and letting him do and letting him eat anything he wanted, whenever he wanted. Bedtimes, if they put him to bed and then he got up later and turned the TV on, nobody cared, or nobody put a stop to it, is what I'm, I guess, trying to say. So I brought him home and immediately put a set of routines together, the early morning stuff, get up, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, have breakfast, take the dog out, blah, blah, blah. We had a routine right from the get-go. And at first it was agonizingly painful because he'd had no routines ever. And he got pretty resentful after a while. There's so many rules here. But honestly, I'm very glad my social worker pushed me hard in that direction, because honestly, I can't imagine if I'd gone from, being sure, we can do anything you want, you can have anything you want, to trying to establish boundaries later. It would have been absolutely impossible.
Thank you. Yeah, you're definitely on the same page for that one. And I think that's great advice for anybody pursuing adoption of a child any age. Really, start how you want to finish. I love that. Okay. So my next question is, I actually got a response from Jenna and Amanda on this. So I asked them, what are some of the activities or routines that helped you bond with your teen or tween, particularly during the initial period of attachment? So they said, we love doing things together like dog walks, making jewelry, spa nights, drag makeup nights, and fun fashion shows. We also enjoy car rides with music cranked up, chatting, and grabbing a treat. Other activities include shopping, thrifting, game nights, baking, doing nails and hair, and fun craft projects. One of the most important things we've done is shown interest in Mia's hobbies, whether it's music, her favorite shows, or learning about her bio family. Letting her lead with what she wants to do has been key to building trust. When we show enthusiasm for what she loves, it really deepens our connection. So I thought that was a great response. What about you two? What did you do early on, and what do you do to establish that attachment?
So one of my situations, when I went to India to get my son, I won't go into the boring details, but suffice it to say that Canadian immigration, not India, but Canada, Canadian immigration screwed up terribly with my adoption file, my adoption process. And it got sorted out eventually, but the bottom line was that instead of being in India for the estimate is 4 to 6 weeks when you go to get your child, I ended up being there for 3 months. And I took custody of him, I think it was 9 days after I got there. So we had a big chunk of time together in India where, I mean, trying to run a business from the other side of the world with a 12.5 hour time difference was brutal, but it meant that I was working at night after he was asleep. And so we spent our days together, every single day together, from getting up in the morning to going to bed at night and everything in between. Mm-hmm. There were times that we were completely sick of each other. That's absolutely true. But the fact of the matter is I was a tourist in a foreign country. So, and I'm one of these people, if I'm somewhere where I don't know anything, I go exploring. And so the two of us went exploring and we had an amazing time. One of the pictures in that collage that Christina showed at the beginning was us at the Taj Mahal. And that was one of my most cherished photos because of the fact that we spent a whole bunch of time in Agra, which is where the Taj Mahal is, just exploring the world. We went to Amritsar in the Punjab, and we went to we went to New Delhi. We went to this beach town that I won't even try to butcher pronouncing the name of. We had an amazing time, and truly, by the time we got to Canada, we'd come a long way towards building that bond, and it hasn't done anything but grow since we got back.
Thank you, Tracy. It's a lovely story. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, for us, I mean, a lot of what the others have already said, but one of the big things is Sydney had expressed to us she really enjoyed being able to sit down for dinner as a family, which is something that my husband and I appreciate as well. So, I mean, aside from the odd, well, weekends now, because she's got a boyfriend, and we're not as fun. But majority of the rest of the time, between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, we come together and sit around a table and we have a meal and we have conversation and we talk about what's going on or plans that are upcoming. And it's just kind of, I don't think a lot of people do it anymore. And it's something that we all enjoy doing. And we know that at some point we're all going to come together that day and it'll be at dinner. So
that's great. We know you have rules on technology. I'm curious to hear those. Okay, but we'll move on. Would anyone like to speak about the role of patience and listening in your relationship with your teen and tween? Maybe before, I'll just quickly share what Amanda and Jenna shared. So in terms of the role of patience and learning, they say we stay curious, avoid judgment, and act with kindness. They understand that Mia has been through a lot, and they win her over by truly listening, asking more questions, and offering advice only when needed. They've learned that patience, both with Mia and themselves, is essential. Having patience with yourself. Would anyone like to add to that?
That one was a hard one for me at the beginning. I mean, it's still hard, but at the beginning it was brutally hard. Because I wasn't raised that way. I had a mom who loved to hear me tell stories, but a dad who when he wanted to play dad, then he was there and he was engaged and he was fun. But when he didn't want to play dad, or when he was traveling with work or whatever, being that listening, compassionate, patient parent, it just wasn't in my life. And so when we had the early struggles, I have to admit that I sometimes tried to figuratively muscle my way through rather than listening and encouraging. And so I still feel guilty about that. I've learned a whole lot in the last year and a half about showing him he's valued rather than showing him that he's a nuisance or that he's not, what he has to say isn't important. That was a really, really hard lesson. And now he blossoms, and so do I, when he's sharing stories with me and I'm sitting focused and listening to what he says. It's the best lesson I ever learned.
Thanks, Tracy. Kelly, did you want to add a little bit to that, or I can move on to the next question? Okay, so we're just starting to wrap up the questions that I have set. Again, if anybody listening wants to type in a question in the Q&A, please feel free to do so. Okay, so would anyone like to share a story that really stands out in your adoption journey with everyone who's listening in today? Anything that stands out to you?
Well, I could say that last Saturday at his soccer game, Gopi scored his very first goal and I cried. I don't know who was more excited, him or me. Anyway, exciting. That one stands out because it was so recent, and it just the joy in his face when he came racing around the field. It was just a beautiful thing.
There's joy in daily things, right? That's the little things. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think just on that same kind of vein, I don't know, in the summer, maybe late spring, early summer, we were sitting around the dinner table. As you all know now, that's what we do. And at one point, Sydney just kind of said, there was something that she's like, oh, people have always told me this, but I feel like I'm just finally now able to realize what they're saying, like that's actually true, like what they're saying is actually true. And I'm like, oh, what do you think's different? And she goes, I think for the first time in my life, I'm like settled. And it was like, try not to bawl at the dinner table, right? Because it was like, she's like, now, she goes, I think I can just finally now, all that other noise is gone. And I can understand that when I drink water, my skin is better. When I do this is because people would always say those things, but I'm like, it doesn't compute. There's too much noise going on that it didn't make sense to her how that could even be. So I think through the struggles, then it's all, she's young. She got a long future ahead of her, right? So if she's now in a place where she's feeling settled and she can think about those other things, she can think about the correlation of how much water she drinks and the condition of her skin, how it's impacted, then all that other stuff will just fall into place.
We have a question from Lindsay. So she's asking, can you share any techniques you use to get through a wall of teenage ambivalence, to get through their walls when they are closed off?
Okay. My son isn't a teenager yet. Exactly. He's 12 and he's also developmentally delayed. So he can often seem more like a 7 or 8-year-old than a 12-year-old. Conversely, there's times when we're doing something he loves and is good at where he almost seems to be a 20-year-old, so all range of ages in there. But no matter what age he's being, he's got some, I'll call them anger management issues that we're working on and have been working on since day one. But he has had various anger reactions, from temper tantrums to silence to saying awful things, that sort of thing. The hardest one to deal with for me is the silent treatment. And what I've learned, again, I used to try to muscle my way through and demand that he tell me what was bugging him and blah, blah, blah. And what I've learned with him along the way is that I need to leave him some space until he calms down. And then we always talk later. And he's always willing to talk later. But if I try to force the issue during the event, it just doesn't work. So that's how I deal with that wall. Wait till he relaxes and lets the wall come down a little bit. And then we can talk about the whole thing later.
Yeah, that's great advice. Definitely. Thank you for the question, Lindsay. Okay, so I have maybe just one last question before, again, we can open it up to the audience if they have any more questions. So just looking back at your journey, how have you grown personally as a parent through adopting an older child or teen? And would you like to share any advice to anyone that's watching today?
I've changed as a parent exponentially because I wasn't a parent before. I mean, I was a foster parent, so I parented children. But I've learned a lot about myself, about patience, and not everything needs to be fixed. Sometimes you just need to listen, and just being present and being consistent is life-changing and impactful in kids. And it's adoption isn't for the weak. You need to be a little bit crazy and just kind of do it scared and reach out to people, because there's people who've traveled the path before you, not your exact path. But you don't need to do it alone, and doing any of this in isolation is not advised, because it has its times where it's messy and it's scary, but you also have big, beautiful moments as well. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. We have a comment from somebody listening in. I'll just read that. Thanks. My now 12-year-old son was 4 in the foster care with MCFD when I became his adoptive parent at 50. I really related to Tracy's story about how difficult it is if previous caregivers have no boundaries, loving but allowing everything and responding with treats to tantrums. I still have a lot of issues and we're working through. Tracy, did your son speak English already?
Yes, for which I'm very grateful. His first language was Telugu. He was born and raised in southern India, but the orphanage that he was in was a U.S. Christian-based organization, and they had bilingual caregivers in the home. So for the few years before I went and picked him up, he was speaking almost exclusively English. And thank goodness, because it so helped him settle in. He still struggles a little bit with the language. If people talk to him really fast, and that's something I learned very early on. I'm a fast talker, and I learned that I had to slow down a little bit when I'm talking to him, and also lower the pitch of my voice. My voice is quite high pitched, and it sometimes made him agitated. And I learned that if I lowered my tone and spoke slowly, he would understand and we'd have much better results.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything? Any tips that you haven't yet told the audience listening tonight?
So I had written down advocacy, research, and curiosity on my sort of helpful hints before this call started. As I said, when I was talking about the school the first year, I had no idea that nobody would give a crap about my kid except me. And that was a really shocking realization. But I've had to advocate for him in a number of venues, primarily at school, but not exclusively. We had an issue with his soccer coach hurting his feelings at the beginning, and I had to sort of share some information with the soccer coach, and he had no idea. Why should he have any idea? But they're really close now. I have a friend who came to visit from England at one point, and he's a Brit, so he comes out with some pretty funny expressions. At least to me, they're funny. But he upset Gopi as well, because Gopi thought he was insulting him when he was actually making a joke. So the language has been a little bit of a challenge. But that aside, going to bat for my kid is sort of fundamental, and everybody at some point is going to have to help their kid get through a rough time or stand up to a teacher or whatever. And that is just the nature of being a parent. And I had no idea, because I'd never been a parent before. And the other key thing, the curiosity part. Everybody's said that about staying curious. And my kid is curious, endlessly curious about every single thing that he doesn't understand. He wants to know more and more and more and more. And so we look up information together, and that is also a real bonding thing for us. So be curious and encourage the curiosity. And it can be easy to say, oh, not now, honey, I'm busy, or let's talk about this another time or whatever. But I've stopped doing that, because in the moment is when it has the biggest impact, and where he feels the most empowered when he learns something new. So the curiosity part is absolutely essential also.
I love
That's
that.
really about it, I think.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're just going to wrap up tonight's conversation. A few takeaways that I got from this is just preparation is so important. Building strong relationships is important, and just embracing the journey. So I just wanted to share with everyone listening that we are hosting a Teens and Tweens information session next Tuesday on November 26th from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So Rapinder's just going to pop the link to register for that. And we'll talk about a wide range of important topics for those, again, considering and curious, like Tracy said, about adopting an older child or teen. And then, yeah, I just want to give a very heartfelt thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing such invaluable insights and personal experiences. I'm sure your stories have proved and provided guidance, hope, and a deeper understanding of the adoption journey. And as you see, no adoption journey is a one-size-fits-all path. Everybody's experience is different, and you just got a glimpse into a couple personal experiences of adoption of older teens and tweens. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And if you have any questions, you can email family support. And if you have any further questions for Tracy and Kelly, you can let us know, and we can try to get some answers for you. And maybe we hope to see you next week at the teen information session. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Kelly, so much.
Thanks for having me. I was thrilled to come.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.